Hello and welcome back to Houdini Crowds Part 2, and I'm going to talk about transitions today. And this is almost like the scene that we left in Part 1. One change I've done is that I have put these guys more in a line. The goal of this video is to show how I can use a curve to make these guys transition into an idle. So therefore I put them more to a straight line. And another thing I've done is that I've imported a new clip. This pose test, if we turn this off and look at this, you can see it's not a very nice clip, but for this tutorial it's okay. It's just an FBX, so I've just imported it through here for the FBX and then merged it into the scene, and then just can use the crowd shelf, bake agent again, and then that will automatically, if you're using the same name, plug it into this merge here. So you can also copy this and then just make sure that you are pointing to the new FBX. And the only thing I've done then is turned off generation of the rig agent layers and shape library, because the first node is already doing that. So now I have this, and I named this clip pose. So let's go down. So we want to do a transition. The first thing we need to do is go into this crowd agent setup, and here we have the crowd source and we have these walking guys. And one thing I'm going to do, because this walk is actually a clip that I want to transition into. I want to transition the walk into the same clip, and you can't do that in Houdini, so you need to duplicate that clip. So first I'm going to do an agent clip, and I'm going to select the walk, which is the whole thing, and I'm going to call that transition. Now we can drop down an agent clip transition graph. So here's that. First plug in the agent. We can see that we have this visualizer that shows all the clips. So you have the walk, the pose, and the transition. And now if I drop down the first transition, and that I want to be from the walk and into the transition. I've actually spelled it wrong. So let's spell it right. Transition. Reload. So let's have the transition here. And now we can see that immediately we get a line here that's showing that we now have a transition between these two clips. And just because it's the same clip, I know it will be a perfect transition. One thing we need to remember though is the loop is between 40 and 71, so the transition has to happen before that, of course. So let's see, if we go here, we can see 69. That's a good transition point, maybe. Let's say so 69 here. So we're going to put that as a sync frame. And here we have the transition region, so you can have a bigger window when this transition can happen. But I find it's better to have a lot of transitions and very short windows. I'm going to have 69 to 70. Because it's the same clip, I want to sync with the same frame. So 69. I don't need to blend these, but I can put 1 just for the sake of it. And to test this, we can go and drop down a test simulation. And we're going to put in the agents in the first slot, and then transition graph in the second. And you can actually try out your looping properties here too, if you put it in the third port. So let's see what this does. First, let's go in here. We have the walk, and we want to go to the transition. So let's see how that looks, and it's going to trigger on frame 10. So when it's red, it's not triggered, and then it's going to turn orange when it's triggered, and then green when the transition is done. So you see, it's a seamless transition, of course. But we can also add other windows. The more windows we have, the faster the agent can react when we trigger it. So let's take another pose here. Let's go to maybe 55. So let's do a new window here. So 55, 56, and let's sync that with, let's see, maybe 85. So let's put 85 here, and now we can have a blend of 3 frames. And because this transition is going to happen before this transition, if we just run this test simulation that is triggering on frame 10, we know that it will be that transition. So let's see how that looks. Yeah, it looks okay. Let's use that. And now the second thing I want to do, now I want to go from the transition to the new idle pose I have. Let's look what can be a good frame. let's go to here. As you can see, here around here is finished, so 104. So if we go in here, and I'm gonna drop down a new transition, take the transition to the pose, and now you can see that we have a line between the transition and the pose, showing that we have a transition between these two. So let's, what did I say? Transition, I said 104, I think. 104, 105, and just take it from the beginning. In blend, I'm gonna have a lot of blends. So let's go to the test sim again, and now we're going to take the transition to the pose, and I'm also going to turn on the foot locking. So let's see how that looks. So yeah, it looks good enough for this tutorial. Like I said before, it is not a great clip, so it is what it is. Okay, so let's drop down a null. Now we're ready to move on. So we're gonna have out transitions here. I'm gonna color that black. And I'm also gonna draw that curve that I want to use as a trigger. If we go to the top view, drop down a curve, click this tool here to draw a curve, maybe something like this. And then I'm just gonna draw a null, call this out trigger, like so. Okay, let's go to the DOP-sim. So if we go in here now, the first thing we need is an idle state, because now we just have the walk state. So to have that, we need a merge, so we can have two states, and then we're going to drop down a new state, a crowd state, and we're going to call that pose. I'm also going to go into this crowd object, and here in the clip transition graph, I'm going to point to our transitions, out transitions. So now let's drop down a transition, a crowd transition, and a crowd trigger. So in the crowd trigger, let's point to that dictate object distance, a sub object, and take the trigger, closest point, and if it's less than 1, then it's going to trigger. And from here, we're going to have walk to pose, and then we're going to connect it here. If you just do it like this, it's not going to use the transition graph, it's just going to do a blend, and that will not look pretty, so it will look something like this. Oh, actually it's even worse, because I forgot to turn on locomotive instead of in place. So let's try that again. You can see, not very beautiful. So let's turn on the transition graph. So use clip transition graph. And now you might think, but hey, wait a minute. We don't actually have a transition between the walk and the pose. Because if we look here in the crowd agent setup, we don't have a transition between these two. But the good thing with Houdini's crowd system is that first it will look for a direct transition. If it can't find it, it's going to find a way around it. So this will actually go through this transition and then into the pose. So now if we go back to the DOP-sim and play this, you can see it is stopping with the transitions that we built before. Yeah, so that is an intro to how you use transition in Houdini's crowd system. So I hope that you found this useful, and see you next time.